Strength in Leos.
How's it going, everybody? It's Evan back with the Strength in Leos podcast. Happy to bring you guys another episode. We're on session 2 of season 4, so we're just getting started with this new season of the podcast. If you guys haven't listened to the first episode already, make sure to check that one out. It was with Matt Bronick. It was a great episode, and I appreciate everyone for the feedback with that episode. We also had a bonus episode that came out with that one as well, so make sure to check that one out too if you haven't already. So this episode is going to be with Chris. Chris is back onto the podcast. We have a ton of awesome, great information for you guys on this one. A lot of Chris's opinions, and you know how Chris is. He's just always giving it straight up and always giving just great advice for new breeders and great stuff for new people to learn, and just his ideas and thoughts on how you could really just take things up to the next level as a new breeder, or even if you're already established and are looking for ways to kind of just push through hard times and always work on that work ethic, which is something that Chris always talks about. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Before we go on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. Impeccable Gecko is a small to mid-sized family-operated hobbyist breeder operation. They specialize in leopard geckos with high-quality genetics. Their goal is to provide customers with the absolute best animals that they could produce, coupled with honest and transparent business methods. At Impeccable Gecko, integrity and animal welfare are above all else. Impeccable Gecko is a strong supporter of the Strength in Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available. John of Gecko Boa started early, like most of us, catching lizards and snakes in his backyard at any chance he got. Over the years, he has kept and bred more than 80 species of reptiles. In recent years, his focus has turned to specializing within the genus Eublepharis. He has worked hard to pioneer some of the most cutting-edge leopard geckos while maintaining genetic purity and honesty. He also keeps the most diverse collection of pure Eublepharis species in the world. He has coordinated with biologists around the world and has contributed DNA sampling and distribution range info to help sort out the cladistic relationships within the genus. Check out geckoboa.com for more info and available geckos. Suburban Geckos is operated by Chris Charlton. Chris's passion and enjoyment for herpetoculture, and more specifically leopard geckos, drove the desire to take his hobby to the next level. With experience in breeding and raising reptiles well over 20 years, Chris is dedicated to producing quality animals for both the hobbyist and breeder alike. Suburban Geckos treats each animal with the utmost care and respect, and cuts no corners when it comes to health and integrity of their geckos. What started off as just a couple aquariums has grown into quite the collection in just a few years, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The dedication to their animals is unparalleled and evident in the quality and health of their animals that they produce. Exemplary customer service is another area where they excel. They're readily available to answer any questions you may have regarding their animals, husbandry, and etc. For more info and to see their availability, check out suburbangeckos.com. Blizzy Bold Leos, while new to the scene, is taking strides in following the footsteps of top-tier breeders and keepers in care and ethics while aspiring to bring fresh looks and crosses to explore latent potential. Prior to becoming a breeder, Greg of Blizzy Bold Leos completed hours of extensive research on lines, ethics, morphs, and how certain traits interact with others in order to begin projects which are coming to fruition already in the second season of breeding. With a major focus on line breeding the correct way and customer service done right, Blizzy Bold Leos aspires to be a breath of fresh air to the customers and keepers they encounter. Be sure to check out their Instagram, Blizzy Bold Leos, and stay up to date on project development, availability, or just tips on having healthy animals in your care. Dab Exotics is a hobbyist breeding operation that was started in 2017. They specialize in producing healthy leopard geckos from top quality genetics. Dab Exotics is an awesome supporter of the Strength in Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available for sale. Shane Kelly is a blue-collar, working-class guy that has a reptile breeding business with his wife and kids. They are currently working with high-quality ball python morphs, western hognose snakes, and select leopard geckos with a focus on bold stripes, and they're looking forward to adding Albie Snow and Ghost this year. They have been listening to the podcast since the beginning and are proud to be a Season 4 sponsor. Go check out their social media, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and also check out their morph market to see what they have available. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Strength in Leos podcast. We're here with our man, our rock on the podcast. Chris, welcome back to the podcast. Glad to finally have you back on.
What's up, Evan? I am certainly happy to be back. Feels like it's been a long time.
Definitely. People have been asking, where's Chris been at? And Finally got you back on the podcast, and I know we're gonna have a great combo today to just catch up.
Yeah, I think, what was it? Was it like January of 21 the last time that we talked? I think it was. I think it was the beginning of the January.
No, that's crazy. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
I think it was.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Was it
Wow.
like
You
January
know,
of
lots
21
happened in the
last time
past
that
year and a half.
we talked?
So
I think it was.
Indeed,
I think
it
it was
has.
the beginning of the January.
it's almost like a whole new world has been popping up with geckos and just the world in general. So, yeah, we almost need like one of those Google year in review type things to fill in the gaps of everything that happened.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year for sure.
So just, I guess, recapping from this past year with geckos and everything. I know last time we talked, you were working on building that addition to the house. So how's all that going? You're still breeding, obviously. You're still in the game.
Yep.
So yeah, just any updates you want to give everybody listening today on that stuff.
So yeah, I'll try and keep this light. Certainly don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this stuff, but just kind of, I've had people ask kind of similar things, like, it's like I was kind of getting on the point. When we talked last time, it's like, you're kind of climbing this mountain, and you get to the point where you feel like everything's really firing on all cylinders and going really well. And then literally right after we talked the last time, my life took a serious turn. So at the end of January in 21, my wife Jenny was diagnosed with a really aggressive form of breast cancer. So that, obviously, as it does for most people, we were just kind of rocked by that. And that was all happening at the same time where, I was ramping up to produce the most geckos that I had ever produced, in addition to kind of what you referenced with, the gecko facility, addition to the house. So, we had to kind of rapidly figure out what it was that we were going to do. Was I going to produce that much? Were we going to put the build on hold? So she pretty much decided that, none of that could, as far as backing off any of that couldn't happen. Right. So she pretty much said, we got to go, you got to keep going full bore on this stuff. So we did. So it was, 6 months of, full blown chemotherapy for her. And then, like most people know, we've got a couple of, really little ones at home. So, you're dealing with that with a, at the time, 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, still the day job. She worked her day job the entire time through the treatment, never missed a day. It was absolutely insane. But then we started the build, in the process. Unfortunately, as most people have probably experienced too, working with contractors isn't always the best situation. So we had a friend of the family that had agreed to kind of assume the project management role over the project, and had a couple of different crews in here. Long and the short of it, it wasn't being managed. It was being done not at all to the drawings, to the blueprints that my father-in-law and brother-in-law had drawn up. They're engineers. So long and short of it, it got roughed in, and then we pulled the plug on it because we knew the way that it was going. If we finished it, it would be an absolute nightmare. So fast forward to, we got rid of all those crews. The project manager had people look at it, inspectors. They said it was the worst job they had ever seen. Not only that, but it all had to be torn down. So luckily we found a new crew that has been excellent. They're great. Their craftsmanship is awesome. But fact remains, we lost, as of right now, we lost about $30,000 in the process of the old build, having to tear the old build down, and now we literally have to build it back up. So so we'll basically either we're going to be going to the old project manager and basically saying, hey, here's what all this stuff cost us, take care of it, or ultimately we're going to be involved in taking them to court and all that stuff, because I'm willing to throw a little bit of money away, but I'm not willing to let people walk with with 30 grand. So so the room build is back on. It's happening. It certainly didn't happen the way that I thought it would, or during the time frame that I thought it would. And on top of that, it was stupid on my part, and it just proved to me like you're still constantly learning in this, regardless of how long you've been in it, how much you're producing. We went on good faith of them saying, like, here's the time frame that this would be done, with the original crew. So it was kind of like that influenced, our decision, for me to produce as much as I did. And now, you're, stuck, with a lot of geckos, in a situation, as far as, racks and logistics, and, that's far from ideal. The workflow is very difficult. I mean, it's pretty much taken over, our entire basement, and that accounts for living spaces as well. So very much a live and learn, situation, but it's been, 21 and even 22 now, you think about, the economy and what all of us to some extent are dealing with, in our own ways, our own situations. It's been a rough year, year and a half now. So yeah, that's just, I wanted to throw that out there because it's one of these things where it's like, I'd kind of disappear for months at a time and then post, pictures of some geckos and then disappear. And obviously I wasn't on the show. So, I know you had some questions. I'd certainly, gotten questions from people, over that time. So it's kind of like just giving a little bit of an overview of what was going on here and why, but, nonetheless, all that to be said, the gecko operation never stopped. It continued rolling. It's just, there was a lot going on here, on my plate, incredibly stressful time. But, things are looking up now. So if we can fix this, this economic thing that seems to be happening, that would just make everything that much better.
Yeah, but talk about roll with the punches. Like, man, been hit around a couple of times and you're still in it, and even that by itself, that kind of speaks to a testament of just like your heart to keep being in it. So
yeah, I think people can, the younger folks can listen to what I say and say, he's a boomer or whatever. I'm not, well, I'll never be a boomer, but like definitely being, one of, I guess, the older generation, of breeders. I mean, I've seen it not only in leopard geckos, I've seen it in my personal life. I've seen it, in business. There is, and I don't want to, I'll never paint anything with a brush so broad as to say that everybody is a certain way, because there's not. I mean, there's exceptions to all of this. But there's always going to be somebody that is looking for that instant gratification, that quick hit, and the reality is, like, to some extent, those people they're going to crash and burn, maybe not quickly, but a lot quicker, than other people will. I mean, we've said this a bunch before. I mean, this is for those people that have a passion or believe they have a passion to do this long term. Like, you have to play it like it's a long game. Like, you can't. Yeah, I pay very little attention to the short game. Like, even at I just turned 47 this year, and I'm still looking at things, whether it be projects, and looking at, okay, well, in 3 years, where do I want to be with this particular thing, or what do I want it to be in 5 years? Like, I'm not planning on, I don't have plans to stop, anytime soon. And of course, like in the immediate, like, you need to, the idea is to produce nice animals, every year. So if there's any immediate or more instant gratification, it's that. But like, you got to be thinking, if you're not thinking a few years down the line on this stuff, then in my opinion, you're kind of missing it. And I've wondered over the last couple of years, like where that next generation, and I don't, again, like, you're not going to find me, putting myself on a pedestal or John on a pedestal or anything like that. But like, where is that? And it's not necessarily about size, right? Like, where's that next person that's going to produce 1,000 a year? Or it's not about that. Like, just where are those next cornerstone type people for the hobby? And I don't know, like, maybe we're seeing some of them now. Maybe we haven't even met any of them yet. I don't know, but like, that's the kind of thing that I look for. I certainly see it. I see potential, like in pockets, here and there. There are people that I talk to, younger people, that I'm like, okay, like there's potential there. Like, the question is, will they stick with it? Or is it going to be the kind of thing where, in a year or two, they're gone with the typical 5 to 7 year cyclical turnover that happens in the hobby? Then you've got the, kind of the flip side of that coin, which is the people that appear to be really into it for, we'll say, the fame, really into it for the money, whether that is the people that, are doing a lot of lemon frost breeding, in conjunction with pushing that stuff on a variety of social media platforms. Whether that is the people, it never ceases to amaze me. I'll just kind of troll through, people's, morph markets and stuff, and it amazes me. Like, if I look up Black Knight, like, I will see like so many Black Knights and variations, and I drill down at, like, and it's people that I've never heard of, before, right? Small breeders, right? And it'll say, okay, so-and-so has 15 animals, and like 5 of them are Black Knights, and the rest of everything looks like something that I would get from PetSmart. You know what I mean? And to me, that's an indicator, right? Like, if Black Knights are what got you into it and that's really your thing, like, knock yourself out. But like, my point is, I see so much of that stuff out there that, I don't know, you just kind of start to question, like, I don't know, how many people are really into it, and where is that push, from the next generation to really focus on the stuff that subjectively, like the stuff that matters.
Right. Yeah. So, and when you're talking about potential, what are some of those things or some of those traits that you see in some of the people that you think are, possibly pushing those boundaries, and possibly could be one of those next, like, cornerstone people that we're talking about in the hobby, that are pushing boundaries and are going to be here to stay, and those sort of things? Well,
so there's a few things. Part of it, I think, is it's inevitable at some point that if you want to succeed at this at a whether that's a larger level or be one of those more recognized breeders. I mean, the reality is that quality has to come with that, right? Like, you're not going to get people excited and talking about, just kind of basic, if not like subpar animals, right? So I'm not saying, oh, everybody get into this your first year and go spend $10,000, investing in your collection. But the reality is, I can see a mile away the people that have kind of popped up appeared to have popped up in the last few years that you can look at it and tell like they invested in their collection.
Yeah.
Like I can look at it even more broadly than I know they bought a bunch of nice stuff from me, or I know they bought some stuff from John, or like you can just look at what they're producing and go, yeah, they whatever their capital was that they had, they made an investment. And that's going to be huge, right off the bat. Again, I'm not saying go into, a crazy amount of debt, but the quality of the animals, that's paramount. It's, we've said this before, right? Like it's just kind of crap in, crap out, right? Even if you have to do that in smaller increments, you need to be really smart about the purchases that you're making for a variety of reasons. Obviously, things more intangibles, like integrity, honesty,
Integrity. I don't think we've ever talked about that before on the podcast.
Yeah, I think we did talk about that. Yeah. Cause the definition.
Talked about it. We talked about the blog post you made.
Yep. So, it's that kind of stuff. Like you see experienced breeders that have been around for a long time that are doing stuff that they know they shouldn't be doing. And the fact of the matter is, my question is, how often is that stuff happening and people just aren't getting caught? Right.
Right.
And, I had a conversation with John about this. I had a conversation with Don about it. I've probably chatted with you about it over the last couple months. Like another thing too, is you feel like you see subjectively like the hobby shifting a little bit in those kind of areas to where, I don't know, I had to ask myself, I'm kind of like, wow, like have I turned into the guy that, am I annoying because I am an advocate, for, honesty and integrity? Like, and it's terrible. Like, when you're looking at yourself, like asking yourself the question of, why do I care so much, or should I continue to care about these things? I don't know. It was a really weird thing for me to kind of come to grips with that like I have people not pretty regularly, but enough. Like I've had people that if I threw their names out, like people would clearly know who I was talking about, that have come to me asking me about the same kind of situations that they've had, with breeder XYZ. Right. And it's like, at this point in my life, with everything I've dealt with the last year and a half, I have zero interest in getting involved in the drama. None. I have no time for it, which is why I pretty much, I'll answer questions that people ping me about. I'll talk to people. I'll post animals here and there, but like that's about it. And people have come to me within the last 6 months, wanting to talk about my situation with certain breeders and things that I've experienced or things that I know. And it just, like I said, it made me kind of question. I know how important those things are in everyday life. You talk about integrity and things like that, at least to me, incredibly important, which is why I surround myself with, good people. But, I had to ask myself, how much is this happening out there? Like, is that where we've gotten to? Like that we just it doesn't matter. We just say what something is. And if it's our project and we're in control of it, we can just say whatever and sell whatever at any price and none of that matters. I kind of go like, if the answer to that is yes, that statement is true, then, what the hell are we all doing here? Like, what's the
what does that say about you and what operation you're running?
Right. So,
yeah. No, I'm totally with you. Yeah, and it almost seems like sometimes it's like you're kind of like busting your butt to, we kind of all know the grind that goes into cleaning and all that good stuff, and even testing. Sometimes we have to sacrifice a male or a female that could be breeding to way better things than maybe the things that we're thinking of breeding to, just to make sure that we're doubling down on testing things. And you almost you see these things and you're kind of like, dang, am I like the only one who's still doing this the way that, that the hobby was built on, doing it with integrity and making sure everything's right? And it kind of gets you just thinking about like where everybody else is at with this kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, that, like you said, like that's the stuff, like that's part of it that takes effort, that takes documentation, that takes, right? Like if I don't know, I'm trying to think of so if I had a tangerine, firebolt cross, red stripe kind of thing, that by all accounts that was het for bell, that by all accounts I looked at that, and to me visually, like that looks like a firebolt and it comes from firebolt lines, right? If I take that and I cross that to a firebolt, non-het, legit firebolt, and after a season or so, like now some of these are going to be het bell or possible het bell, and then eventually, like I have, like start popping, visual bells out of it. Like at what point is it okay, if ever, for me to say that's a firebolt bell or that's a firebolt het bell? Like technically speaking, it's not. I mean, technically speaking, it never is. Right. So like
from the moment you crossed it, it's not that thing anymore.
And I know that is, believe me, like I know that is annoying, and I know that takes extra work, and I know that is a much more complex description. But like I said, the reality is, like, I could have done that hundreds of times over here, like right now, as we say, post things and just say it's firebolt het bell, and looking at it, nobody would ever know the difference or question me about any of it. For that matter, if I wanted to be, one of the, slimy people that I'm aware of, like if somebody pinged me and said, where did this come from? Oh, well, it came from, 2 firebolts, and, one of them was het bell or 50% het bell. And still nobody would know the difference, right? Like when you talk about like integrity, like this is something that you have to have, like when you're walking around, like I said before, like when nobody's watching, right? And it just, I know there are people that are operating in a good way, with integrity, but I know, as there probably always have been, there are people out there that, are, whether that's, cutting corners or, and that's the kind of stuff, it's just not gonna be fruitful. It's not gonna get you there. Eventually, at some point in time, if you don't feel bad enough about yourself for doing it, which you should, at some point in time, you're gonna get pinched. You're gonna get caught, in the lie.
We've seen that. Like that's, some of the stuff that you've worked with and passed on to other people, you've seen it come back to you, and people are kind of pinging you about, hey, so this person says they have this. Did you ever sell to this person, or is it really pure? And some of the things that we've seen, it's like geckos originate from somewhere. You didn't start. Most of the time, people aren't starting their own lines that are legit and are calling it pure and stuff like that. So a lot of it comes from somewhere, and people talk, people find out. So that's always something that should, if anything, that should always be in the back of someone's brain.
And I've had conversations about these situations with, very, very prominent breeders that, they did kind of take the stance that, it's their project. They can do whatever they want with it. And I disagree. And I will continue to disagree. And, I kind of looked at, these are people that I typically align with on most things. And, this is one of these deals where we're going to have to agree to disagree. It's not okay.
But is it really their project though?
Right. Correct. Which is why, I spent some time, I say looking at myself in the mirror going like, is it me? Like if my, my buddy here, that, we're usually in agreement on stuff is not on page with what I'm saying here. Like, is it me? Like, am I the problem? Do I give too much of a crap about this? Right. Like, and the answer I kept coming back to is no. Like for me, if that's where we're at with this, like what is this going to be uh, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, what's it going to be long after I'm no longer vertical? I do think there are things to, aspire to, and, just a certain level of, it goes beyond professionalism, right? Like just to, be good, be honest. Because the reality is, I mean, you're taking, if in the situations that I either had with myself or that other people had brought to my attention, and I'm not saying like, oh, like I'm the savior here. Like if those conversations wouldn't have happened, what would have been the downstream effect to all that? To the people that had came to me and said, I bought this as XYZ for this amount. And I said, well, you got screwed. But what would have happened if those wouldn't have? I mean, it's not going to end the world. I get that. But like that person would have gone on and sold how many of that stuff as what they were told that it was. And if we have that, if that's pervasive, like if we have that running all over the hobby, like literally I have to ask, like, what's the point? Like, if we're all just creating pretty geckos, like, let's just throw names and genetics out the window and we'll just all agree to sell pretty geckos and put a price tag on it, and whatever you want to name it, it is what it is. And like, to me, there's no middle ground. Like we're either there or we're all to the best of our ability trying to be honest and, employ things like integrity. So I agree. Off my soapbox.
No, I agree. It's like, it's great to hear your perspective on this stuff, because I feel like these are thoughts that have definitely gone through my mind, or even other people. Like you see what happened with Miles and the whole Cypher and Marble Eye thing, and you see things like that, and how he was totally honest with people and upfront about it. And if he wanted to, he could have like shut up and not said anything, and would have sold a whole bunch of stuff, made money, and could have dipped out of the hobby. But you see certain people and how they look at the hobby, and even talking about sustainability. Like if this is the track that we're going on now, what are we going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now with what we're working with? And what's the point of talking about this stuff if it's not going to be worth anything? So it really brings people to think about the sustainability of some of these things. It's not stuff, we're not just talking about it just to talk about it for fun. We're not doing it because it helps us somehow or makes us richer or puts us on a pedestal somehow. We're talking about it because we've seen where this goes in the hobby, and we want to prevent people from screwing up something that someone spent countless hours making sure that something is what it is. And to me, that frustrates me when someone puts their blood, sweat, and tears into something, and then within a moment just kind of switches and changes it to something else. That infuriates me.
Yeah, the reality is this: there were, and I'm trying to think of, I want to make sure I frame this so I'm not calling anybody out. But when you think about, to me, like true, cornerstones, pioneers of this hobby, that were here long before I was, so we'll say we'll use the term blood as an example. So let's say that there are three kind of the classic like pioneer breeders. If I threw out the names, everybody and their brother and then some would 1000% know these names. So let's say that these three, pioneers had gotten groups of tangerines from the same breeder. And I don't remember off the top of my head if it was Europe or if it was Asia. So these tangerines came in, and all three of them kind of separated their group from the same group. But if you look at the work that was done by those three breeders over the course of the next few years, night and day difference between the results that all of them had gotten. Now, whether that was luck of the draw, whether that was their own kind of curation of that and the way that they went with it, night and day difference, right? But it's like you can look at them and you can look at pictures of them from back then and know that, these are not, they shouldn't be classified as the same thing subjectively. So in talking with one of these, breeders, I said, well, where did your bloods come from? And the story that I got was, they came over in the same group originally that me and so-and-so and so-and-so had brought them in. And when so-and-so started calling their line bloods, I figured we'd just do the same. So when you think about the foundation of, does it matter in the context of today? Is it going to change your, operation that you have there? No, but like the point of the matter is, and I was, on one hand, I was shocked, and on the other hand, I wasn't shocked at all. And I just had to laugh and shake my head, because the reality is today, as it stands, and I'll call out, one of them, like, JMG, when you talk about the regular, and he's the one that coined that term, when you think about the original bloods, to me today, still today, those are in their original form, amazing. Like the results that he was producing for how long ago that was is incredible. But like, I'll have these first year, like teenagers, young people ping me talking about, their bloods and this and that and the other. And I'm like, is there even a point to using that term anymore? Like it just doesn't. So this was part of like, going back and talking to, these other two gentlemen, come to find out that anything that was ever purchased from this particular fellow that was labeled as blood, it wasn't. Like, to me, anything blood should originate from Jeff Galewood, period. End of story. Like that's where it stops. Like there is no exception in my mind. But you're talking about literally foundational breeders to the hobby, right? And this kind of stuff was going on, and I'm sure it's still going on today. But I digress. I don't know.
It's a rabbit hole, man. It's like, it's crazy though, because it's like something that you're seeing and something that people are picking up on, and they're saying, well, okay, if this person is doing it, then why can't I do it? And that's where it's even a bigger conversation, where other people are copying people who seem like they're doing the right thing. The animals are phenomenal. Ethics are pretty good in terms of like what they're breeding. They're not breeding lemon frost, enigma, that sort of thing. But I think when you get into the details and the intricacies of leopard gecko genetics, I feel like that's also another part of being separated from everybody else. It's like, how far you're willing to go into the details of lineages and even just labeling everything. There's so many. You could have easily called your gecko genetic blood cross to something else, like easily, and you're still continuing. Even when you cross into other things, you're still continuing to label the other lines you put into that, and people are really missing that point of what they're doing and even what it takes to get there.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes, like, how much, like, I don't bring that many animals in, anymore, unless I'm bringing them in from, across the pond. But, the questions, like, it does matter, like, especially when you're still building your collection. Like, my collection of breeders at this point is like, if my wife sees a box of another gecko coming in, she's like, what are you doing? Like, it's crazy. But like, for people that are just building their collection, like, if you're not asking these questions, you need to, like, and that doesn't matter if it's John, it doesn't matter if it's Evan, it doesn't matter if it's me. Like, you should be asking these questions. Like, where did it come? If I sat and had a conversation with one of the pioneers saying, oh, these are bloods, like, interesting. Like, where did they come from? Like, everybody should be asking those questions all the time. Like, now don't get me wrong. There is a point of where it gets kind of silly. Like, I'm not providing family trees with all of my geckos, because at this point, like, in some cases, like, you're talking about, even if I just said things that are going back 10, 12 years by the time that I had my hands on them, right? Like, I don't by any stretch think I'm still working with any animals from like the first 2 years of when I was breeding, because I just wasn't conscious about the big picture. So it's like, thankfully, most of the people, the vast majority of people that purchase geckos from me are either other breeders, and they, I would like to think, there's a sense of trust, there. Or it's people that aren't even that experienced that have heard, anecdotally from other people, and there's, at least some modicum of trust there with me. But like, I'll go back as far as I can without, getting, ridiculous about it. I mean, the documentation it certainly exists, but in some of these things, it does get, a little crazy, going, if somebody wants to go generation by generation. But long and short of it, like, people need to be asking these questions all the time, but especially when you're first getting into it, and trying your best to understand what it is that you're purchasing.
Yeah, and then also where you're going with it, because if your intentions are to get something and then have the idea of, okay, I have these, let's take, I don't know, atomic G stuff. If you're like, okay, I have this, I'm going to cross it to something else, but it's going to be so much atomic G blood that you don't even notice that I crossed it into something else. Like, it's like, why are you even doing this? And I think intention is something that a lot of people have kind of gone away from in the hobby that I've noticed. Is a lot of people are just taking things and kind of mixing things, and not just waiting for something to pop out randomly. And once they pop out that one cool gecko, that'll be like their, I don't know, their moose or whatever for someone else, and then say like, this is the moose line, whatever. And that's not, I think, people just aren't thinking things through. And I think that's how things get even muddied even more.
Yeah. So I think there's a few layers to peel back on that example. So, one, I think probably a good majority, I would have to think, I was certainly one of those people. Like, a good majority of people get into this hobby because they see something that's appealing to them, and they want it, they have to have it. And then when they decide that they're going to breed, like, I want to reproduce these, which I think that's great. That's fine. I've certainly done it. I mean, you look at, you look like something like fireballs, right? Like, I produce a lot of those. John produces a lot of those, but originally, like, John didn't start the fireball line, right? Like, they came from Italy. So, there is some level of, taking these lines like this and continuing to refine them and move forward with them. And there are people like every year with me that, where are the firebolts? Where are the firebolts? I want to get the firebolts, which is cool. Like, they're, the people are wanting to reproduce them. Now, it remains to be seen. I think this is something that we've hammered on a lot before. And I think, forever we're going to continue to have to hammer on this stuff, right? Like, if I look at, any of these things, even if it's recessives, like, red diamonds, like if I look at, red diamonds, firebolts, tangerines, the list goes on and on. Any of these things that are line bred, right? There is arguably going to be, when you think about sustainability, there is a time that's going to come with those that if you're not putting anything else into them, you're going to start to see issues, right?
Yeah.
And luckily at this point, with where firebolts are today, I don't think John does either. I don't see any kind of issues, at least not significant ones with, of course, like, you're going to have an oddball that just wasn't a really healthy egg and it comes out with a short tail, or it's, got a kink, here or there, or eyelid stuff. But like, on a large scale, given how many of them are being produced, like, we're really not seeing issues. That said, there's always, at least with me, that proactivity of, I'm crossing them into other stuff, right? So this is where, like, the white and yellow firebolts are coming from, the white and yellow Mac firebolts, or the Mac firebolts, or like, they're getting crossed into things that are completely unrelated to the firebolt line. And, once you've got that kind of refined, like with the stripe, that stuff can ultimately go back into it, and that's going to freshen up the gene pool, a little bit. So, going back to your example, I think the wanting to reproduce things as they are today, you know, whether that's getting a group of atomic G stuff or whether that's firebolts or red diamonds, like that's all fine and good. It's great, but like you got to have the thought of this isn't going to be sustainable forever. So, you know, how am I going to contribute to trying to strengthen this for the long term? But then two, it is, you know, what are you going to do with it, you know, to make it interesting past, right? So it's so cool. Like you bought some really nice firebolts and you're producing those. That's awesome. But like, do you have plans to do anything else with it? Are you going to do anything different with it than what I'm doing or, you know, what John's doing? It's that, we've talked about it before. It's that vision, right? Like,
Right.
and not, you know what, like not everybody has to have a vision, but I feel like we need a certain amount of people in the hobby with vision. You know, because as much as I, you know, like, you know, my stuff or this guy's stuff or that person's stuff, like, you know, you need a certain amount of those people thinking in the same vein, but thinking differently, right? Like their artistic vision is different than what mine is. And you need a certain amount of those people to keep pushing everything forward. You know, we don't have, you know, the leopard gecko hobby is not the ball python hobby. It's probably never going to be the ball python hobby, right? And you look over there and you see all this stuff and these amazing looking animals, and like that, you know, I feel like, you know, the ball python hobby it moves at this rate, while the leopard gecko hobby is just like, you know, just ticks up. You know, and I think a lot of that is just, you know, where's a lot of that visionary stuff. You know, I'm happy to see that with Black Knights, at least people here and there, it's like, you know, they cross them into, you know, some other things now, whether that be snow stuff or, you know, that's at least a little bit encouraging versus continuing to go down the well of, oh man, like if
all black animals,
you know, and nobody is going to convince me that, you know, somebody just so passionate about black geckos that, you know, that's the majority of what I want to produce every year. I mean, it's a money thing. It's a money thing because they continue to, you know, to bring the dollars, right? Like it's not, I'm just producing pure Black Knights, you know, into nothing else. And, you know, I produced 100 of them this year and I couldn't be happier because they're just, I mean, they're cool. But, again, like where's that, you know, where's that vision? You know, those, you know, creative thoughts about where else can we go with this stuff. I think we need more of that.
Definitely. Yeah. And I feel like along with that, a lot of people really just want to make a name for themselves. And sometimes a lot of people are desperately trying to figure out, okay, what is my contribution to the leopard gecko hobby? And I feel like with that, a lot of people get into this nature of social media, or they get into this nature of every line that they get is now their line and they rebrand it and name something else. So for a lot of these people that are, maybe they're in their second, third year and they're saying, you know, what you're doing with the firebolt stuff and creating all these sick wine yellow and snow firebolts and stuff like that. That's really awesome to see. But obviously you didn't start off with a lot of that stuff that you're making. How can people really come at it from an angle of A, being honest, but then B, not, I want to just say not make a fool out of themselves, but in that same way where you're trying to do something awesome, but not at the cost of honesty and not at the cost of being a social media mogul in leopard geckos.
So I think I've always been of the opinion with the social media thing that it's some degree a necessary evil. You know, you know, in my personal life and what I've observed with others, it's certainly done more harm than it has good. And it's a little bit different today than it was before. Like if you, in years past, right? Like, my likes on Facebook don't come nearly as plentiful or as quickly as they did, a handful of years ago. And, maybe that's because Facebook is boomer book or, but whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, like, if somebody's goal is to become a social media influencer, like, far be it from me to say not to do that. But I think the appearance is that sometimes people get confused between what the difference is, or confused or don't see that there's a line between being a social media influencer versus being, a respected leopard gecko breeder, or, somebody that's aspiring to be a top tier breeder. Like, my question would be, where's your focus? Which one is it that you want to be? I don't know. I don't think that any of these hobbies, whether it be snakes, geckos, whatever, I don't think that they would be where they are today without social media. Like, if we were still back still back on gecko forums, like, it would be a totally different thing.
Yeah, just based off the people we're reaching now.
But I see things like, I think I had sent that. Yeah, I know I sent this to you the other day, right? That somebody on Instagram had posted a picture of a tangerine that they produced, and it had like lavender, on its head, and they described it as, something to the effect of, really excited to see where this purple head, in quotes, tangerine goes. And I'm like, it's these kind of things that just, it kind of puts me in that mode of, man, like, I really weep for the future, because it's like, okay, like, yeah, I get it. That's not this, terrible thing that they've done, but it highlights something to me. Like, you don't know, like, what research have you done that you're unaware of the fact that a purple headline of tangerines exists?
Right.
And it's
all way better than whatever that thing.
Right. So,
yeah.
So it just, I don't, and I don't know, I don't know what the answer is. For me, it's, spend a lot less time, focusing on your social media career or, exposure, and much more on your animals, and clearly much more on the research, that you're doing. It's, I don't know. It's hard for me to say too, because my view on social media is not, it's not a positive one. Like I said, for me, it's a necessary evil. I mean, that's how I communicate, with a lot of people, which is good. I have a lot of like long, chats with people. Like, that's how they reach out, which that's cool. But I don't, my goal, if there was a goal that I have, with social media, it's just, it's reach, it's marketing. For me, it's the same way that I still use something like Morph Market today, right? Like, in a way, it's a marketing thing. For me, post a picture of a neat looking gecko here and there, but I couldn't have less aspiration to have 50,000 Instagram followers or something like that. It means nothing. The reality is, as I see it today, the hobby, at least for me, my sales, my interest still largely comes from Facebook. It still comes from people hitting my website. It's not the largest percentage is far and away not Instagram. And I think that's largely the case. Are there people over there with nice geckos? Absolutely. Are there people over there that, that are into the hobby and buy things based off of what they see? Yes. But like, that 50,000 reach or 100,000 reach or whatever, that's also a lot of people that like to look at pretty pictures, right? Like that
how many of them are actually interested in that hobby?
50,000 of that 50,000, how many of those are going to translate into sales? And if sales aren't your goal, that's fine too. It really, like, what is it? What is it that you're doing this for? And there's no really right or wrong answer. I mean, there's all kinds of people that I see all the time that, like, it's a really passionate hobby for them, right? Like, they've got 10, 20 animals, and that's awesome. That's great. Like, if you never want to grow past that, fantastic. But that's not, I don't, that's not the situation for me. I don't even think it's not the situation for people that are producing 50 a year or, 100 a year, or, you got to have a way to, to move these things. So, the exposure doesn't hurt. It's just when, where's the balance there? Like, if you look at these things on a scale, like actually focusing on, your operation and more the big picture versus like the social media piece, like, people need to understand, like, that exposure is not going to translate into sales. If it did, even with Facebook, given the amount of Facebook likes that my page has, if that number translated to sales, I should be producing 1,200 a year, if that was true. But it's not. So
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And even when it comes to just like we talked about goals and what is the purpose of doing this? What are your goals as a breeder, or if you're a breeder, or if you're just a hobbyist with a couple geckos? That's totally cool too. But I feel like having a direction is super important. And even I think we're talking about some of the pitfalls that we're seeing in the hobby and kind of some of the things that we're seeing with breeders. Education is a big part of what's happening. I think we've talked about plenty of times about how much more that we'd love to do, but there's only so much time in a day to help people and to help people on a mass scale. When we're talking about genetics, when we're talking about the intricacies of different lines and the histories and everything like that, and even how to come at this hobby in an honest and just a way of getting rid of that ignorance that we've talked a lot about in the past. So yeah, it's just really important to get out there and just do things in a way that's honest and transparent and really highlight that. I think when we highlight that and lift up people that are doing that in the hobby, we're going to see so much more of a drastic change than the people who are getting put on a pedestal for bringing attention to things that are negative and drama in the hobby. That's taking over way much more of the things than people that are actually doing a great job in the hobby right now, who are producing amazing things, who are doing things in a right way. Because the drama and the BS kind of covers all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think, all that said, I've looked at myself, and not solely because of, but, one of these fools that's, pushing the lemon frost stuff, it was brought to my attention a few months ago that, there was a comment made on a video that, while people like, John and I are, quietly dominating our corner of the hobby, and not giving anything back to the community, which, that stirred a wealth of,
struck a nerve.
Yeah, for sure. Because trying to be as objective as I can, I don't feel like that's the case. I mean, yeah, I've said a million times, and I know the same situation exists for John and a lot of other people, right? Like, there's no time in the day. Like, you're not going to find me being a moderator of a Facebook group. Like, it's just not. Even if I wanted to do it, it's completely infeasible, and would still fall way down the list of things to do for me. But that comment, kind of got me thinking. And, once the room is done and, the dust settles on the craziness that's been our life for the last year plus, I am, there's been people asking, I am going to get the YouTube channel back going again. Probably in a different way than what I did before. I've got some different ideas. But I've got a really big idea that I have pitched to just a couple of people at this point, and solely around just that. Like, if I if I continue to come on here and I'm having conversations with you and I'm having conversations with John and whoever else about, like the sustainability of the hobby and where's it going, and okay, so how could I give back at a different level? And I'm not going to go into the details here. It's pretty deep. And it's something that would be a significant investment of my time, significant. So it will have to come post, me having the corporate career, which is going to necessitate this economy to bounce back a little bit. But I think it's a fantastic idea for the right people. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think for the right people, it's a big opportunity. It's something that I wish would have been available, to me 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And I would have jumped all over it. But we'll see. I can't, I'm not going to divulge any more about that.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, right. Yep. That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, even when I hear that stuff, it's so ridiculous. Like the stuff that you've even just putting into the podcast, but even outside of that, with the way your site is set up and your Facebook notes, even John's genetics page, like if that didn't exist, like where would a lot of people be with the hobby and finding that information? I feel like it's ridiculous when there's so many amazing people that have done a lot for this hobby and put a lot of time and effort into it. And then you see people that are going behind their backs and totally just disregarding it.
It's pretty easy at this point, given that, every bit of my, career outside of geckos, it's just all been about people, all of it. And technically it's people management, but to me, it's been about leadership. Right. And I feel like I can see those people that are approaching this, the way that I would like it to be approached. The people that approach me incredibly professionally and respectfully, just as a person. And I don't know, I can just see, it's like you see the whole package of somebody and you just see the promise in them, regardless if they produce 50 and get out in 3 years, or if they stick with it for the next decade and produce tons of animals. To have them come back, after, a year of breeding, after I've taken a little bit of extra time, talking to them and working with them, and for them to come back with that level of gratitude, saying, I wouldn't be, even a year in, 2 years in, I wouldn't be where I am right now. If it weren't for your help or your that's huge to me. I literally, I was reading my wife an email that somebody sent me about that the other day, and I was legitimately emotional, because it's just, that to me is as rewarding as it gets. So, you take that and juxtapose that against, some idiot, that's pushing BS and on top of that saying, oh, these guys don't ever, give back to the hobby. What would that look like to you if I was? What does giving back look like? Does that look like, supporting your lemon frost production, or what is? So yeah,
right. I think we just need a breather from that. It's man, you see all these things, and it's crazy to think about just how people's perspectives could be just so twisted, with when we're talking about geckos and stuff like that, but then also when we're talking about what people are producing, and also we're talking about people here, and we really see the difference between the passionate people and the people who are really just so humble to learn. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people are missing today is humility. Humility to get feedback about there's stuff I've bounced pairings with you, and you're like, hey man, I don't think that'll work well. And I'm like, okay, you got to humbly accept that advice and stuff like that. And it's, people are just so prideful in the way that they're doing things these days, and they don't even want to get feedback and are open to that stuff. So it's hard to kind of push people in that direction when you see people just in a state of wanting to be independent and then not wanting to get help from a lot of people as well.
It's not just John, but I'll be the first to admit, like if that my relationship with him years and years and years and years ago, that was a massive turning point for me in this thing, because he brought me into the fold, for the same reasons that I'll spend extra time with certain people today. And if it, weren't for that, like, I don't know where I'd be with this today. I don't know if I'd still be in it today. So yeah, I think it's a hugely important part of all this. And I certainly, I feel like I have done that. And it's not just exclusively, it might be more time that I invest with, a smaller group of people, but like, I don't recall times of ever just shutting anybody out and saying, figure it out on your own. Like if it's something ridiculous, like, we've talked about, like, you can see the people that haven't done, any research. Like, I'm not gonna,
right.
That's a huge turnoff. So, you kind of point those people in the direction of, teaching themselves to fish a little bit, as it were. So, and some of them come back later and they approach things a little differently than they did the first time, which is good. It shows me they've learned. Everybody should be trying to help everybody out, like in this hobby. I feel like, and it's not exclusive to leopard geckos, like there's always going to be, unhealthy competition or, jealousy or, unfortunately, like all that stuff is going to come with it. But I don't know. I can only give a gnat flying around. I can only give what I've been able to give, like, given how things have gone, but the future looks pretty bright. I just need a little bit more time, and we'll see if I can't give a little bit more instead of just sitting over here dominating my corner of the leopard gecko market.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think when it even comes to nurturing people, I feel like that's one thing you get when you buy from people like you. It's like that. Not even that. It's just like spending. Because even before, I remember I spent money with you. You were still helping me out with things. But it's like when you see you don't just get the quality behind the name of Suburban Geckos, you get that help with certain things like that. And I feel like that's another important thing that people need to take into account when you're buying geckos of not the best quality, not the best breeder. You're also getting that in terms of customer service. You're also getting that in terms of knowledge and what else comes with that. That's a huge thing that people also need to understand.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and I think this happens, with in a lot of areas, not just leopard geckos, right? Like, but it's yes, like there's a value. There should be a value add, I mean, ideally with everybody, but you talk about buying things from me or from whoever, like that is a thing for me that I look at in myself that I want to provide to other people, right? It's not one of these things where it's like somebody buys something and then they're asking me questions and it's like, oh God, like here's so and so again, like that's all part of it. And I feel like for me, if people were to say like, what should I do? Or like, what is the formula for success? Like, I mean, that's absolutely a part of it. Like, you should be, living that role, right? Like you know that people are coming to you for a certain reason. Like, part of that, maybe that's a name. Once you get to a certain level, they're obviously, you're buying something, so it is a product. It's a living product. But the reality is, man, like, why does everybody want to, so many people want to buy stuff from Gecko Boa, right? If anybody thinks that part of that isn't, the name and what John's created. Like, you're fooling yourself. Like, it's brand interest and it's brand loyalty. And I think part of that is just been that, you look at somebody like John as an example, like the value add to the community, like the value add to the people, his customers, to the people that have purchased from him. Like, it's providing a consistent experience, right? Like, if you pay attention to the things that people say about you, or, the write-ups, the reviews that they've given, or the unboxings that they do, or whatever, it's just like, people, generally speaking, people glow. Like, I can only speak personally, but they glow about the experience that they have, right? And that is, I might be having a really, really crappy day when I'm dealing with them, right? But that can't come through. No way, shape, or form can that come through, right? Like, everybody has to have the same experience every time. Helping them out, give them a little bit more than what they thought they were getting or what they asked for. And that's all.
That's not an easy thing to do.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. But I can't say enough. Like, if these are things that even a few people aspire to, that's the kind of things that you got to do. But, everybody might not be like me, right? Like, I see, recently I stumbled upon, an unboxing video that another breeder did, and it's a breeder that's been on Strength and Leos, right? And I sat and I watched this, and I mean, it literally, like, I'm putting myself out there now, but like, I legitimately like got emotional watching it, because this person was like, his experience that he had with me and discussions and everything was everything to this guy. It was everything. Like, saying, like, Chris doesn't know, like, how much of a fan I am and the way that he does this. And like, if you're passionate about what you do, like, there's no way that doesn't hit you somewhere.
Right.
But like, that person saying that and feeling that way it doesn't happen without all the things that lead up. Like, he wasn't saying that, like, just because he opened up a box of a gecko that he thought was beautiful. I mean, that's part of it, but it's everything else. So I don't know.
Just imagine where the hobby would be if that was the thing that people were striving for, other than kind of the other things that muddies up what it means to be a gecko breeder these days.
All the other things are a distraction.
Yeah.
So
I guess one thing that I want to ask you then when it comes to that, I know we've talked a lot about the distractions, but what keeps you focused into sticking to your craft and what you're here to do, which is trying to produce the best geckos that you can, and then obviously providing the best experience you can for other people?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, passion is the biggest thing. Like, it has to be there. I think, not to say that there aren't, massive breeders out there, supplying PetSmarts and, like, producing 10, 20,000 leopard geckos a year. Their passions probably went out the window a long time ago. So it's not like you can't produce leopard geckos without having a passion, but like, I'm not embarrassed of, like, I still, like, I guarantee you throughout the course of a day during breeding season, I check my incubators more than probably like year 1, year 2 breeders do. Like, and that is not, like, the way my incubators are set up, like, those geckos could sit in there a week or more and be completely fine. Like, I'm not going to end up. So my point being is, I don't have to walk by those that many times a day. I could walk by them once a week and everything, and clear out a bunch of geckos at one time, and everything's going to be just fine. But I am legitimately today, 13 years in, like, I am still, if not more, as excited. I mean, I don't know, year 1, I was pretty excited when I first produced my first handful, but like, yeah, I couldn't quantify it, like, to you right now. Like, I am still that just stoked, to open that up and see what's come out. And it's not even like, this isn't about, oh, like this particular project is going to be the one that's, you know, going to bring me $2,000 per gecko. And like, it's everything. Like it's, you know, and obviously sometimes it's a bit of a disappointment, right? Like sometimes you look at them and go, oh, like how did that happen? But like,
Yeah.
my point is, like, I'm illustrating like that passion is still there. Like my wife would be like, why are you checking the incubators again? Like, you know, it legitimately.
Right.
So the passion should be there, in my opinion. What else? I apologize. What was the question again?
Just what keeps you passionate about the geckos?
So yeah, I think,
or even on times or days where you don't feel that passion.
Well, and I think part of it, there's part of it that's fear. I think, to be honest, you know, it's feeling like you can't lose a step, feeling like you can't miss a year and not be innovating and moving things forward. And that may be completely unrealistic and not even rooted in reality. But I think, if I'm being honest, like there's, you know, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Like if you have a goal in mind, and kind of unintentionally, like you get to a certain point over a course of years where you're occupying a certain space, like in a hobby, whatever area, tier that is, like, you know, I think fear is the kind of thing that for me has kind of kept me on my toes. And, you know, a healthy fear, not a fear like I go to bed at night and I'm cowering in the corner because I think, you know, oh God, if I don't produce XYZ this year. But like, I think that keeps me moving too, right? Like that keeps it, because it's hard, you know, when you're dealing with the day to day. Like to be honest, I don't spend enough time, in my opinion, sitting down and putting pen to paper and really like trying to be much more surgical about planning things out. That is something that I aspire to do. I think, okay, like I have gotten to where I've gotten in this over 13 years, like giving like this much to it. You got all these other pieces in life that, you know, have to come too. And I go, you know, where could I be with this if I gave 100% of myself to this? Right.
Yeah.
100% of my mind. If I wasn't thinking about running to that next meeting, if I wasn't thinking about, you know, the performance reviews that need to be written or this, like if I could dedicate all of my mind space to this.
And then compound that year after year.
Right. So, you know, there is a bit of, you know, I don't know, you know, when you feel like you're to a certain extent doing it kind of off the side of the desk in a way, you know, there's a certain part of it that I think that fear keeps you moving and keeps you in check to go, okay, like make sure I'm not just kind of pairing garbage to garbage and, you know, throwing animals in with whatever. And so I think it's that, you know, there's the passion, you know, there's a little bit of fear. For me, it's commitment. Because like I may or may not have said in the past, like I quit everything, you know, all the way up to when I was in my 20s. I literally quit everything. It didn't matter if it was, you know, college or a sport or like that, just kind of became my thing. It was like you just never saw anything through. And a big part of that is with leopard geckos is that like I refuse to. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, like, you know, you get in spots where, you know, life seems like it's not, you know, going so well, or, you know, the chips are kind of, you know, stacked against you. Whatever your, you know, belief is, or, you know, how you look at that stuff, like, you know, there's been days where I've said aloud, like, you know, to whomever, like, you're not going to break me. Like I might be down on one knee, but I'm not stopping. So
Right. And have we seen that for this past year and a half with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's a lot of things that, that go into it, and aspiration too. Like I still, I gave that example about, some things that I'd like to do differently, but the reality is like, I still, not only do I aspire to be better in certain ways, like I know I can be better. So it's not like I aspire to, and maybe I could, like, I know in my head, I can be even better than whatever it is I feel like I am today. So it's like, if you give me just that much space to do that, whether that's putting the job in the rear view, that, I know that it's putting the job in the rear view. It's getting the room done. Like, there are things to me that when those keys get turned, like, that unlocks a whole nother level of potential for me. So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, definitely, for sure. And it sounds like you even have these tangible, I don't know if you want to call them goals, or kind of these stepping stones that you're taking to kind of one up yourself each and every time. I always think when people talk about competition in the hobby, it's like, for me, it's like the biggest competition is almost like yourself. Like, you're always battling with yourself, even if it's like a long day of, work at school, whatever. And you're like, I don't want to go and clean geckos today, but it has to get done. And it's like this constant battle within your mind it's always that temptation to like take your foot off the gas, or to not do this one extra thing, or go this one extra step further. But I feel like when you tap into that passion, like we're talking about before, that thing that gets you excited to see if you hit the odds on that one clutch, or if that thing that you were envisioning 3 years ago, is it finally coming into fruition this year? I feel like that excitement is what you also see in breeders today, and that's things that you see across different hobbies. We were talking about ball pythons before. You see the top guys like are still passionate about these morphs that they got 20 years ago, that they're still trying to hit these double recessives on. And that's the exciting thing that I think people need to grasp onto in this hobby, that I feel like is kind of lost in a lot of ways. But I feel like once people could really continue to grasp onto that and still be up late at night researching like we have been, and looking at, your YouTube videos, Matt's videos, looking at John's genetics page, it's like when we tap into that almost like childlike, I don't know what you want to call it, that childlike one or desire for geckos, I feel like that's where the hobby is something special to me, in my opinion.
Absolutely. No, I like I said earlier today, like we don't know who those next people are, or where they're coming from. Before too long, the way time goes, like, you stick with this, you'll end up being one of the old timers. And John and I will be long gone. But like, I have hope. I definitely see some kind of glimmers of hope, and from a pretty wide demographic too. Like, some of the people I'm talking to are more like my age range. I think some of them, I know some of them are even older. And they're really wanting to, and have done things, in my opinion, the right way, the way that they should be done. Obviously, you think about when you got into it, and, you've grown substantially, and not saying in size, like in a lot of ways, since the time that you started, all this and got into it. So, there's hope. There's always going to be the turnover. I think, we've seen some of that this year. We'll probably continue to see some more, and fresh faces will come in, and maybe a couple of those fresh faces will stick through the next turnover. And then, it's all cyclical. For me, it's just important that there are some, foundational breeders to this, and at various levels, whether or not you want to say those levels are about scale. Like, is it about scale? Is it about quality? Whatever. Like, there are those people that, that are still around. Like even I feel like the last like kind of major generation, like the legacy, will say like, I don't feel like there's that many around, which is why, I reached out to Miles when, he had said he was selling off a bunch of stuff and downsizing. And I'm like, no, I've seen Don go and, Christy and, Dylan, all these people, and it's kind of like, there's just a few left, from those days. So, it's important that, while those few, have stuck around, we need to start backfilling, some of that loss. And I'm seeing it, onesie twosie. For me, I kind of look at those, that handful or a few handfuls of people and see what's the longevity. Like, are they really sticking with it? Are they past year 5? Are they going into, year 8 or year 10? But, remains to be seen. We'll see where it all nets out.
So just from saying that stuff, on the more positive side, what are some things about that encourage you about the future of the hobby and kind of where you see? I think right now we've talked about it's kind of a weird time with everything that's going on, economy stuff and breeding, but what are some things that kind of encourage you from that?
Well, I'm hopeful that the economy does turn around. It appears like it's a rough spot right now. I'm going to test that, for myself in the next few weeks when I get some things posted, and we'll see, how bad the economy is. But, there have been those times we've felt this kind of stuff historically. It may not have been as bad as it seems right now, but we felt it, we felt the dips, and then we felt the kind of the extreme highs too, where it bounces back, and when it bounces back, it swings back really hard. So, I look forward to that because those are good times for everybody. It's not just me. It's not just John. I mean, anybody that's, buying geckos, selling geckos, it's a good time for the hobby. What gets me, excited, looking forward to the future. Just to see where, as unlikely as it is that we'll probably continue to see a lot more like actual like genes popping out here and there, that stuff I feel like is far and few between in our hobby. Like, I think the stuff with like ciphers and things like that still excites me because it's interesting. Again, I think some of this comes down to it's being more short-sighted. Like you don't, and I've certainly, it's stuff that, whether it's John's, Miles collection that it popped out of, like I was never, like over the top about, the way that ciphers look as an example by, comparison to something like Lemon Frost, right? Like it's kind of a different thing. That being said, you think about where something like White and Yellow started out and look at those old original pictures of White and Yellow and look at what they look like today, right? So to me, it is what are the potential of some of these things 5 years, 10 years down the line, which is why, I've produced quite a few of them and I've kept them all. I haven't sold one cipher, one het cipher yet because it's going into everything else. Well, anything that's not Het Eclipse, of course, but, but again, like it's that long play. Like I don't look at something like Cipher as the short play. Like, does it make sense for me to post some and make a little bit of money while, they're at the height of what they are just as a cipher? Yeah, I mean, it makes sense from a business perspective, but like I'm much more interested and passionate about what are those results long term.
Right. It's a long game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's stuff is hard for me because I'm not an incredibly like patient person by nature, but some of this stuff you just, you have to be patient with it. I've never been a huge melanistic person, and I've had the carbons here, and now just this season, working on Black Knight carbon crosses that these things it looks amazing. And, that to me, it's that broader implication of, what does that mean, for melanistic stuff. Right. Like I had tried it with the black pearl charcoal stuff, and that stuff, from what I gather, is going to take more of like, F3, F4 before you really start seeing darker stuff. And that stuff has a tendency to lighten up over time anyway. But like with the Black Knights, like those crosses to the carbons look amazing. And like I've said in years past, like, you've got Black Knights, which as a whole, like you look at the entirety of it and you go, I don't know, like there's probably a lot more that aren't viable versus the ones that are. But then you look at something like carbons, which literally came out of, it was a couple of geckos from a pet show, in Poland, just random stuff. And you look at how big and like thick and healthy they are. And on F1, with Black Knights on F1, like they're creating pretty darn close to like solid black geckos, right? So that kind of stuff is exciting to me. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of projects going here and things like that, that I'm excited about. It's just, I think for me, it's just, and a lot of it too is like we talked about, seeing where the hobby itself is going to go. I'd love nothing more than to see it kind of grow back in a way into what it was. My operation is going well. My geckos are healthy, like everything is good, but like I don't necessarily see the hobby itself as it exists today, like it has been in the past. And I'm not saying that we can't evolve. I'm all for evolution. I just think, and I get this is subjective, like evolving in a positive way, evolving in a way that's good, for the hobby, I think is important. So.
Yeah, that's all we want to see at the end of the day. We want to see the hobby growing. We want to see new breeders getting into it, more breeders being passionate about the same things that we're passionate about. We think about the first time we hatched our first eggs, and the first time we hit something that we loved and that we were really just wanting to hit on in terms of odds perspective, or even just in terms of like line bred stuff, a project that we've been working on. And that's the stuff that really excites us, and really just expanding that to get more people into it. I think that's really one of the biggest goals I think we should have. And then also, how can we make that sustainable in the future for more people getting into it, which is, for me, I know that's something super big that I'm passionate about, and something, especially with the podcast, that I try to do is get people like you on who have been in it for a while and can kind of tell us the real about what you think and what your thoughts are, and how we could get more people to kind of see how you're seeing things and kind of get over that learning curve that we've all been over, to kind of pass through a couple of those steps while we're going through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we went this far and we didn't even talk about projects. And I know tons of people are wondering what you're working on and some of the stuff. So we already know kind of the basic stuff that you're working with, but anything from you that you're super excited about producing this year that you see?
So I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, obviously, anything white and yellow is obviously going to be kind of a big thing here, going to occupy a pretty fair amount of space. So, as most people knew, what was it? Was that? Oh yeah. So right around the same time of, my wife getting diagnosed and all that stuff, that was also the time that I took over the remainder of the Highwoods collection.
Right.
So
that's one thing. That did happen. That's insane.
Yeah. So that was an additional, what he had left, kind of 100, give or take, animals that I added. And a big part of that for me was, it was kind of that old, the passionate, kind of gecko nerd from the past in me was like, trying to keep this stuff going. I thought the same thing when I saw Miles downsizing, right? Is that, even if I get, I'm known as like that guy, there are very few collections at this point today that I look at and I go, God, like, please don't just part that out across the whole hobby, because it is going to get lost. It's going to get lost forever, period. Like,
Right.
So in taking that stuff in from Don, like, Don was always, his stuff was always some of my favorite from before I ever even knew him. This is going back years and years and years ago. But the reality is, this is where you learn how specific a lot of this is to somebody's vision, if they have one. Because Don, we talked a lot about it. I have all the documentation in the world on Don's collection. But that first year, amidst all that other stuff going on, it largely didn't pan out. The pairings that I made, things were popping out left and right, and I'm going, really? And there, in my mind, there are very, very, very specific looks to mostly everything that Don was working with that will be like forever imprinted, right? So I'm like, that's the stuff that I'm trying to create. And quite honestly, a lot of his breeders were not old, but a bit on the older side. Like these weren't 2020 offspring, right? That stuff was gone. So these were more foundational breeders. And I'm like, so you think about contingency planning, right? So if you have used these two cornerstone males for the vast majority of your white and yellow bell stuff for like 6 years now, and all the amazing stuff that you have produced from them, you have sold. And it's the logic of, and it makes sense, just different from how I do it. Like the logic was, if these things are still producing stuff year after year, that's still like right up there with the best or the best in the hobby for this particular stuff, why bother, switching out to another male? Well, the problem is as they get older, you start dealing with contingency planning issues, right? Where I go, okay, like I've taken all this stuff on, but if this male decides one day I'm going to open up the tub and he's belly up, that's a problem. So at that point with Don's collection, it became this pretty significant focus of contingency planning. I am targeting, males out of this stuff or females out of this stuff because there weren't 3 of this one particular thing that came in. There was 1. So if it's gone forever. I'm not going to go out there and find this stuff. You think about like all the funky jungle stuff, like go find a bunch of that in the hobby right now. And I'm here to tell you, like the babies that are popping out of that stuff now are crazy. But while there are plenty of animals in his stuff that had funky jungle influence in them, the ones that really truly came from some of that original stuff from Mike Eklund, like you're talking about a couple of animals that were going on 7 years old, right? So you're like, oh my gosh, man, like, okay, like on top of everything else, like I got a significant issue, if not problem, that I got to focus on over here. So, but I think for the most part, like I've got most of that behind me. So things are looking good there. Project wise, the white and yellow bell stuff is looking awesome. Anything white,
as it always does.
Anything.
You've been telling me. I finally had to get some stuff off of you, and you've like even better than the white and yellow Trimper stuff. And I mean, like, man,
yeah, it's the white and yellow Trimper stuff. There were things from his collection that I was really targeting, and they produced much better this year. They're still small, so the vast majority of the stuff that I've produced so far is still in that kind of, I say it's an ugly teenager phase, but they're not teenagers. They're still like, and like the little stuff, like when they're like, hatchlings in those first few months, like I don't really pay much attention because in my experience, like it just changes so much. Yeah. But I think there's going to be some pretty unique things, that I'll put out there this year. There was one particular, a couple of white and yellow bells that he had that I literally had never seen the look of them before. And I'm working on desperately trying to reproduce that stuff, before, hopefully nothing happens to them. But, so there's all this, and then, my white and yellow stuff and all that is like happening in parallel. So as it stands right now, like I kind of keep them for the most part, like largely kind of separated. I've crossed them over a little bit. So there's that, the melanistic stuff I'm excited about. I brought a Black Knight carbon male over from Luca Gonzini. That is this male is just amazing. So being able to kind of kick the carbon stuff in gear where we're not going to have to wait 4 or 5 years for something to be really, really dark right off the bat, but still be really solidly rooted in carbon genetics, I think is really cool. Like I said, funky jungle stuff is looking crazy. With those, it just kind of remains to be seen how many people at this point like even know what that is. Like if I talk to you, if I talk to Matt or John, like of course, like all those people know what it is, but like how many of the new generation, like if I put funky jungle on it, how many people think, oh, he's slapping a name of funky jungle on it because it looks funky jungle? It's like, no, that stuff's like literally been around for a long, long time. So
yeah, probably decades at this point.
Oh, for sure. And so there's that. It's weird. Like there are little things that I don't even know why. Like I was out of blizzards for so long, and like I'm producing like Diablo Blancos this year for the first time in like since like my second year of breeding, and I was like, I don't know why, but I'm gonna do it. And now I'm already seeing why I stopped because they're not very friendly. Cypher stuff.
Yeah, I think I saw a post like you hatched out a Murphy's pattern list for the first time or something.
So that was crazy. Yeah. So some of that funky jungle stuff is either het Murphy's or possible. And I hatched out the first Murphy's that I've ever hatched out, which was crazy to me, which is why I posted it. I was just like, I sent a picture to Don and I'm like, how am I doing this 13 years? And like, this is the first time because, there's just, it's like bold stripe stuff,
right?
Like a few years ago, I was just like, okay, like you can't be everything to everybody, right? Like, draw your lines on some things that you're just not really going to focus on. And next thing, 13 years later, and you go like, I've never worked with bold stripes aside from like firebolts, like no Halloween masks, no none of that, which is crazy. And John's like, dude, that's like the equivalent of saying you're not working with tangerines. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, okay, I'll get some of the stuff. And I'm interested anymore. Like it's the sure things are really cool, but I'm all for the long shot stuff. Like, you had kind of mentioned earlier, like going for for an example, like I didn't know like the Clown G stuff that I had. Like I had no idea what was going to happen when I paired that to Blood Emerine stuff. And then they pop out and they're really, really neat. So, and that was at F1. So what's the possibilities for that stuff over the next 5 years? Right.
Right.
So it's things like that. I did, pick up, what was it? Like January, some actual like the last time clowns that like really nice ones themselves for the purpose of, working into some other things like firebolts and, it's like, white and yellows, I feel like is like a go-to or like a core competency, for me. I think firebolts is one of those things. So it's like those things. you know, you look at like firebolts going into red diamonds and things like that. Like, you know, it's trying to build off of the things that I think might be some of the things that like I'm best at or what, but, I don't know, size wise, it's to the point right now where there's so much on the table. As far as projects, like I go back there and look at it and it's just kind of overwhelming. Really. So
Yeah.
should be a good year though. I hope.
That's the hope every year, but
That's right. That's
like,
right.
this is going to be the year, and then pop out stuff and you're like, all right, next year.
Oh, trust me, there's nothing better than taking a super nice pair of white and yellow bells from Don Stuff and going in there and opening the cup, and it's two normals. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Perfect.
Man, and that even like taking it into account, like his season was what, like November, December started around.
So let's see, the rainwater stuff. The rainwater stuff will start going. So the rainwater stuff will start. That'll start ovulating, kickoff in early October, and then his white and yellow bell or his bell stuff will start kicking off like late October, early November. So there's really no off season anymore. And now it'll be interesting to see this year what happens after a year plus of being here, whether or not, because mine that were in the same location, like any of my animals that were in the same location as his, started kicking off when his did, where they don't normally. So
was it like January?
it's weird. You know, so by the time, like, you know, so many people have that downtime like around the fall, and it's like, there's literally like, you know, and with as much as I'm producing, like I'll be posting like from now, like through the summer, all through the fall. And it's like Don really always looked at his collection like it was kicking off earlier than everybody else's was versus later. So when I talk about 2022 animals, for me, like technically some of his started kicking off in 21, but I just consider it 22. So for me, like the 2023 stuff from the Highwoods collection will start going in like late fall of this year of 22. So, I mean, it's year round at this point. Year round, 7 days a week. It's crazy.
28.5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man, it just doesn't end for you.
No, it doesn't. But that's, you know, that's the goal. It's my goal, at least. And, you know, as long as, like I said, as long as the room comes together, I guess I should throw out there, like, as to close the story. You know, my wife is cancer free now. So 6 months of like full blown chemo, 6 months of oral chemo after that to close it off, but clean bill of health. We're incredibly lucky. You know, that's all in the rear view at this point. So yeah, provided, you know, the room gets done, and it'll be amazing, you know, once it does get done. And then being able to put like the current, you know, day job career behind me, things will be in a good spot. I've just kind of been, you know, building and preparing the last season or so to get to that point. And now it's just a matter of, I don't really do well like putting my destiny or my plans like in other people's hands. And that's what you just kind of realize is you're, even with good people to do the room that are on board now, like you're still just at the mercy of other people's schedule. And like I've said, I'm not incredibly patient. So, but you know, we just have to wait, and you know, it's already way past any timeline that I had. So, you know, at this point, it's just kind of like, why get all worked up over it? You know, it'll happen when it happens. So
exactly. But that's I think that's another thing that makes you different from a lot of people. It's like when stuff hits the fan, that's when you kind of buckle down and start making a plan and kind of get things together, where a lot of people just feel like, this is it, and that's just how it goes. But
yeah, at the end of the day, I think you just have to ask yourself what's most, important, or what your goals are. And I certainly would never advocate for anybody to continue doing things that were, putting their health at risk, or, their family situation at risk, or their mental health at risk. But, the reality is, for me, it's, like I said, there were times where, and even still now, like, it's far from ideal as far as like where I want things to be. But you've got your good days and your bad days, and, on the good days, you just have to, for me, I have to continue reinforcing with myself when it's a good day that, the good days aren't always going to last, and, you got to grind through the days that aren't so good.
Right.
But just keeping the big picture, and the goals in mind, as best you can.
Exactly. Yeah, that's well said. The next break I'll take from the podcast is when I'm going down to move down there with you. So get a little air mattress in the gecko room.
Dude, trust me, I'll take all the help I can get. My little ones aren't going to grow up fast enough, and I'm like, how long can I keep? That's the one thing too, is just, the amount of animals here is it's a lot of work. Anybody that's doing this knows the time commitment that it takes to, ideally everybody in this hobby, their primary interest is taking care of the animals and making sure that everything is clean and healthy. And, if we make that assumption, there's a lot of time that goes into this. And if I have my operation down to, if I'm really, really moving at a clip, like a minute, what comes down to like a minute a tub, or 45 seconds a tub, like still, like, you multiply that over, whatever that is, 1,200, 1,500, like there's only so much time in a day, for most of us, like with everything else that we're doing, like, right. It's a lot of work, but I'm a lot like some others. I know, John's kind of been this way, that everybody's got their particular goal, where they want to be, how much they want to produce. Like, of course, like there are bigger breeders out there that you're talking about full blown, employees, health benefits, and for me, like, I was always like, no, like that's, sure, I'm sure there's money, that comes with that and doing the wholesaling and all that stuff, but it doesn't interest me. And I think the second that I have to back away from the operation, as far as like the hands-on, my fear is that's when the passion gets lost. Mm-hmm. And for me, when the passion gets lost, I don't know that my interest would be there. And I don't know that the focus becomes too much the business and too much like the money. And like, if I've got people that are like relying on me to put food on their table. And like I said, when I think about like having an operation where I need to be providing health benefits, I can't even picture that. Right. So for me, it's like, okay, like what can you do that like one person can do without like completely, destroying themselves? And I think I'm pretty much at that spot right now. Like I've pushed that line, where I really don't want to go any further. Like I can't envision, I know there have been breeders, that we're all familiar with in the past that, whether they were, moving and trying to, make a little extra money, like push that 1,000, 1,200 mark. And like, that is insane. I can fathom it based on how much I'm producing now. And I know that is something that, at least with everything else going on in my life right now, not even remotely interested, because I know the time that it takes to take care of that stuff properly. And it just sounds like, I love the geckos, but I don't want to be standing on my feet, cleaning gecko tubs for 6 or 8 hours a day. Like there's no way. So So yeah, everybody's got to do what works for them, but I'm not looking forward to be offering health benefits anytime soon.
Right. No, there's a million other things in life we got to worry about. So it's like all those other crazy things, and just gecko work itself isn't even like, that's obviously a big part of it, but that's not all of it. There's shipments, there's boxes you got to get ready, there's answering emails and messages. So that's not even all of it.
Well, you talk about, obviously right now, like the focus for a lot of people is on the economy. But, you take that a step further and think about like, what the implications have been around shipping,
right,
for the last, right? Like, so and I know some of this comes down to luck, right? But like in all the time that I've done this, I've legitimately never had a DOA. And for multiple reasons, I would love to keep it that way, obviously. But, the amount of conversations I've had, all kinds of people, John and I going back and forth, over the last year or so about like, are you shipping today? Are you shipping today? Like, it's just, and it's because of the FedEx thing. I mean, take weather and throw it out the window. But, the impact that it's been on FedEx, like now all of a sudden, and this is especially true, and I understand it. This is especially true with the people, I think, that are less experienced in the hobby, where you get this, like, I bought something, I want it now, kind of thing. And it's like, okay, I get that. Do you want it alive or would you rather have it dead?
right.
Because, if you trust me, I'm telling you what I'm seeing right now, not a good situation. If this thing gets stuck, heaven forbid in a truck, but gets stuck in a warehouse or lost, but like, it's not going to end well. And I can't imagine period, like sending somebody an animal and them unboxing it and finding a dead gecko, like,
Right.
and at all. But like, people are so like, you get people that are so excited about what it is that they put. Like, I can't imagine being the person that's going through that scenario, right? Like, I'm so stoked to get this animal from so-and-so, and I open the box and it's cooked, you know what I mean? Or it's frozen. Like, I can't even begin to. So there's been a lot of that, a lot of going back and forth with people and saying, okay, like, I'm going to ship them out tonight, or I'm not going to, pretty much all of my stuff routes through Indianapolis or Memphis. And Indianapolis has been one of the worst hubs. It's not great on a good day, but through all this, it's just that much worse. Like, they either can't get people to come to work, so you have these shipments that go there and then they just sit because there's nobody to unbox them and repack them to go out. So it's been a lot of like, I don't know, I think of it in the way of like, and this is make me old, like double dutch, like jump rope. It's like, you're kind of like, when do I go in? Do I go in now? Do we, and that sucked. I mean, even when the weather has been, decent, like, it's just, you'll get this, their systems have been down, they're on a, couple day delay or whatever. And I go, okay, like, I know these boxes I'm sending out are getting ready to route through Indy. Like, what am I doing? Like, if Ship Your Reptiles or whoever you use, Reptiles Express, Reptiles to You, if they're not backing that, with any kind of insurance at all, even if it's just live arrival, like, how can I back that? If I'm sending out 10 boxes and throw a number out there, is the value of all those animals $8,000? Is it 10? Is it like, if I do by my standards what I should do, and I knowingly put all those on a plane and half of them or all of them show up dead, what's the right thing by what I should do? I should refund everybody in full. And what does that do? That, the experience they're having is awful. For me, I just lost, 8, 10, whatever $1,000, and there's however many animals that, that have perished, in the process, and probably not a very enjoyable last, few moments in the box. So
Yeah.
it's one of these things where I found myself this year more than any having to kind of explain to people like, trust me, like if there's one person in this equation that wants this animal to get to you more, like, trust me, I have so many geckos. Like, I don't want another gecko to clean, to take care of, to sit on for another 3 weeks while we wait for a good window. So yeah, it's been a tough, that's been going on for at least, a good year plus now. So it's all that stuff. And then now, with the economy stuff and people going, oh man.
Feeders, I know, is another thing. A lot of people, either feeder prices are increasing or like feeders are because of heat and stuff like that. So
somebody told me the other day that they use large mealworms. I use mediums for everything, primarily because they take longer to turn. But I don't know if it's Rainbow or whoever, they're talking about like limiting orders on large mealworms again. So are we going to deal with a feeder shortage? Shipping has certainly, for me, it's a huge issue because with the amount of mealworms that I order, like I order them from Rainbow via freight, right? So because what was happening was, I was ordering them FedEx, and that was expensive in and of itself, but they were showing up cooked. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a major problem for me.
Yeah.
I got a lot of animals that need to eat. So I order them via freight. And it goes on what they call next flight guarantee. But with everything else that's gone on, that next flight guarantee price literally doubled. So it's like, it's as some other breeders have mentioned to me, like if things keep going the way that they're going, like it's not sustainable. So I don't, and I'm not, I'm usually the one to stay far away from, political discussions and such, but like, who's to say when it turns around, will it turn around? Some people say, they think, January comes around, like it'll bounce back, or I hope that's the case. Because a lot of people, including myself, will be taken care of. There'll be a lot of mouths to feed for a lot longer than what they normally would. So,
right. Yeah. Especially with how many geckos you got going on over there. So it's one thing I think a lot of people don't want to have to deal with. So,
these things are always going to happen, right? You're going to have these downturns, in the economy, right? Like this is not going to be the last one. So I think it's just, and I could preach this to myself, I should have produced this year much, much less than I did. But I say that, just because of the room and everything, but like the last thing I saw was issues with the economy.
Right.
And now, if that boat is true, based on what some people are telling me in the hobby, then I'm in the same boat as everybody else is. So then you go down this road of, and I get it, like you'll start to see people kind of fire sale things. I'm selling off a bunch of breeders that I normally wouldn't, or, I'm selling things at half the price that I would in order to, and I to my own detriment, I won't do that. And it's not because like I'm not trying to give anybody a deal because there's long-term, ramifications to doing that. Right. You start selling, like, as an example, like you start selling your best firebolts at $200 to move them, like that just potentially impacted the entire hobby. Yeah. With that particular morph, right? So, you got to have the space and the availability to take care of and handle whatever number it is that you're keeping or producing for situations like this when some factor is less than ideal compared to how things normally are. So
exactly. And at the end of the day, if people are choosing between gas and geckos, I think gas is going to win. So.
It has to. So yeah, fingers crossed for all of us that things turn around a bit here in the near future.
Right. Yeah. For everything, for that matter.
Yeah.
But Dude, amazing conversation as always. Like people were. I sent you the messages. People were wanting you on the podcast. So,
Well, I appreciate it, man. And I too, like I was thinking about this before, and I want to, obviously we had a lot to talk about, and I want to throw out, like, I appreciate people sticking with me, especially through a time where I just kind of sort of, not completely, but kind of dropped off the map a little bit. And two, I had a lot of people that I didn't really expect, because I didn't come out and post all the stuff about, my wife and everything that was going on. Like, I didn't really go more public with that. One, because I just didn't want that to be the narrative. And two, I'm definitely more of a private person. But I will say, like, for the people that knew, I had some people reaching out that had some incredibly nice things to say, and really helped me, through a pretty rough patch, and trying to kind of tell me, keep your head up, and so I appreciate it always, like, all the support from everybody, genuinely. So, and thanks to you too, dude. It's been too long. It's a really good conversation. It's good to catch up.
yeah, good encouraging conversation, I bet, for the both of us. And it's been a while in the making. Like, man, it's like when we started our first episode of the podcast, and now we're here. So hopefully we still have a while to go, though.
Well, hopefully next year I can get back to my record of being the first podcast of the new season. I know we missed it this year.
I know. Yeah, but we gotta get back on the mark too with that, and then hopefully get a roundtable going.
I feel confident things will be a little less crazy around the first of the year next year. So we'll get back on that. And yeah, roundtable would be good. I'm always up for that.
Right. Awesome. Well, again, Chris, appreciate you, everything you've done for me personally, just helping me out and all the ways that you have, and all the stuff that you do with the hobby. You're not just, let me just tell you, you're not sitting out around in your corner, just
I appreciate
doing whatever you're doing.
I appreciate it, dude.
Sweet. Well, we'll see you soon, and we'll get you back on the podcast.
All right. So, take care, man.
Yep. Have a good one.
All right.
And that's going to wrap us up for this episode of the podcast. Super excited that we finally got this out there. You guys could tell just how much I missed having Chris on the podcast and just hanging out with him and talking geckos. It was such an awesome time to just catch up and, of course, see where he's been at and kind of what's up, and answer some of those questions that have been out there with Chris and his situation and everything that's been going on. So other than that, as you guys know, at the end of each and every episode, I do my one big thing. And honestly, for this episode, it's kind of just the same thing Chris has been saying about continuing to push on and endure hard times. I feel like that's something that we always need to hear. Like, if Chris, for some reason, somehow, some way, like, needed to do something else on top of gecko breeding, and motivational speaking was something that he added on to his resume, it's just such an awesome thing to just listen to him and just have another episode on the podcast and in the books where Chris is just talking about what it takes to be a gecko breeder, and sometimes how life throws things at you that you're not really expecting at all, and just how much are you willing to continue to fight for gecko breeding, and just other things that other goals that may pop up in your life. So just a super motivational thing to hear, something that I'll definitely be listening to. I really don't even like listening to the podcast over, but something that, if I just don't feel motivated, there's so many things. Cleaning is just a simple one that sometimes I'm not motivated to do, or just the grind of gecko breeding and what that takes with other things that someone may have in their life, and then going home to cleaning geckos for a couple hours each night. It's a really big pain sometimes, and it gets overshadowed essentially by the good stuff that happens within gecko breeding and the good stuff that comes with that. So that's just basically going to be my one big thing for this podcast. I want to thank everyone for joining us on yet another episode of the Strength in Leos podcast. Don't forget to share with a friend, rate our podcast, and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strength in Leos. And last but not least, tune in next time for our next episode on Spotify, iTunes, Google Music, and our website, strengthinleos.com. This is your host, Evan Woldridge, signing off. Continue to grow in knowledge and share the strength in Leos.